right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon, everyone. Looks like we have quite a few people here joining us live. Love to see it for Blueprint Live. Today, we are focused on how to maximize leadership meetings with Elate. Welcome, welcome. If you are a customer of Elate or if you are interested in joining and using Elate, we are glad you're here, carving this time out to learn with us today. My name is Karlie Briggs. I'm a senior customer experience manager here at Elate. We also have a very special guest joining us today that's going to be leading the conversation. I know today is going to be an insightful and engaging conversation. And you know, in the world of tech, in today's world where innovation and agility are key, strategic planning can often feel like a moving target. And that's why rituals, you know, what we call here at Elate, regular practices and touch points are truly essential in aligning teams. We can maintain focus and drive long-term success. And today we're fortunate to have Lou joining us. He is an advisor and former COO of Form Assembly. You know, he has spent a lot of time with us here at Elate. He's seen the platform evolve. We're excited to have him here. He brings a wealth of experience in scaling operations at multiple startups, many successful exits as well, aligning teams and creating structured framework that allows flexibility and focus to kind of coexist. So throughout today's conversation, we're going to explore practical strategies and actionable takeaways with Lou specifically on how your team can implement and ensure teams stay aligned and motivated in the midst of constant change and what I can only imagine is a challenging year for all of us. So without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Lou. Lou, if you want to just give a quick hello to everybody.
Sure. Thanks, Karlie. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I know you guys are all busy. You're probably in the throes of your annual planning process at this point. So hopefully there's some good takeaways from our discussion today that you guys can implement or utilize as you get through the end of the year. So happy to be here and look forward to spending some time with you.
Thanks, Lou. So just to give you a little roadmap of where we're headed today, today's agenda, first, we're going to start with the evolution of leadership meetings at Form Assembly. Lou, you know, adopted Elate and evolved it over the course of a couple of years with us. So excited to see that evolution. Then we're going to talk about the power of rituals, that meeting structure and cadence, building a culture of accountability, and how Elate powers the discussion at Form Assembly. And then we're just going to recap on those best practices and key takeaways and dive into space for Q&A. So as you have questions throughout, feel free to throw them in and I can get those queued up for Lou. I'm sure there are plenty of questions on how he does things and find success. So without further ado, Lou, we're going to kind of get into it here.
Okay.
So go ahead. Yeah, let's take it away.
Okay. So, you know, I think one of the things that Karlie and I talked about as we were preparing for this was just the importance of rituals, as she highlighted from the agenda. And I think, you know, like for me, as I've joined different companies, you come in, you kind of get the understanding of how have they done strategic planning in the past, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And I can tell you with pretty high confidence, every company that I've had the pleasure to work with, when you come in, most companies don't have a formal platform like Elate that they can lever to really drive their planning process. So, you know, like a lot of companies, what I have seen and what I saw at Form Assembly when I joined was, you know, very disparate information, very siloed conversations. You know, it was very difficult to bring data all into one place. So having the ability to start out with, you know, a solution that enables you to not only plan strategically, but then execute on that plan and use that platform, to be able to do that is critical. For me, it really starts with regular meetings and leadership meetings once you've developed that plan. And at Form Assembly, we had a weekly cadence when I got there. Still kept that weekly cadence, but that weekly cadence was very disjointed. And it was disjointed because there was a lot of information that was being gathered to track, various KPIs. People were more focused on getting those spreadsheets and different pieces of information updated than they were focused on what insights can we glean from the information that we have. So it was one of those situations where you have an opportunity to now kind of reset the way that you spend your time at that meeting. So with Elate, what we're able to do and do very consistently on a weekly cadence is start the meeting from an Elate dashboard. And that kind of triggers where you're going to focus your time and what your agenda is for that meeting. So one of the things that worked really well for us was in advance of that meeting, using advanced reporting, I would push out just a summary report with 6 to 10 bullet items of what we wanted to cover for that meeting. Um, and we got to a point where we had a pretty good ritual of, let's make sure we have our information everybody has it as of the Friday before, and now we have the ability to be looking at information within the same period, and there's no discrepancies there. So this would enable me to give the leadership team a little bit of a heads up, so to speak, with, hey, here's where we're going to focus. That then would enable us to do a very quick update from our revenue teams. How are we progressing on our new business goals? And then from there, we would move right to the core objectives that we need to focus on for that week in that meeting. And we would use the Elate plan execution feature to really drive that. So any objective that was yellow or red, that was the highlight of our conversation. And we went right to those objectives. It gave us the ability to make sure that there was clear accountability across the org for those objectives and making sure that we were moving those things forward. And at the same time, it gave us a very good kind of call to action. Okay, what should our next steps be? So at a high level, we were able to do that pretty consistently, and it really made those weekly sessions very efficient. I think in the past, people felt like, here's another meeting. What are we talking about? People would bring up other topics that should be offline from that core focus. And then it just level set the week for us. So here's the leadership team focusing on, what objectives are working well, which are not. And let's make sure now this week the teams are focused on if something is off track, get it back on track. Or if we have new data points or information that tells us we should, pivot off of that objective or modify it, we also had that ability to do that. That makes sense to start there, Karlie?
Yeah, I think would love to just start at the very beginning too. We're kind of starting to talk a little bit about how, your strategic plan and reporting was scattered across tools and spreadsheets and all of that. And we moved to consolidated, view, that unified view in Elate. Would love to just kind of hear a little bit more about that initial impact and how you kind of brought Form Assembly from the then to the now. So if we're looking at, how things were in the past to where they evolve to. Would love to hear a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah. So, at the start, it was Google Sheets, Excel spreadsheets, very disparate information, very difficult to uh, bring it all together in a timely basis, really difficult to glean any real valuable insight from it. As I mentioned, people were more focused on um, updating a spreadsheet than they were, what's the data telling us, based on where we are. Um, and then with the late, we were able to move to, real-time data that was actionable. We at Form Assembly are a Salesforce shop, so a lot of the data and information that we focus on is Salesforce driven. So the Salesforce integration was so critical and key to the way that we use the platform, and having the ability to have that information available in real time not only helped us with our decisioning and our discussion topics, but it really started to build this culture of accountability that was really important for us.
Thank you for sharing that, digging in there. Would love to hear a little bit more. I know you started to touch on kind of the power of rituals here. As we look at, I know I get so many questions from customers like, how do you run a successful meeting? Where do I begin? What does that cadence look like? And we have a lot of best practices, that we like to share, getting into that habit of building the muscle around weekly or biweekly updates from those objective owners, reviewing them as a leadership team. Would love to just kind of hear how you implemented those rituals, how those conversations went with almost providing a little bit more structure and cadence to reviewing your plan. And then maybe some just tactical touch points on the different items here as well, I think would be really helpful.
Sure, sure. So, I touched on it briefly at the outset, but it's a weekly ritual or cadence that we follow. Always starts with how are we doing on new business? So our sales and CS teams provide some forecast updates. I then would highlight any trends that we're seeing in any of our data. Could be pipeline trends, could be average deal size trends, whatever, made the most sense to focus on based on the information that we're seeing. And that got everyone into that, regular view of, hey, Monday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern time, we're having a 30-minute leadership session. And in most cases, that's all we needed. It was very rare that we needed to go, beyond 30 minutes. We put it on the calendar for 45, but we very rarely used the full 45 minutes. When I first joined, those leadership meetings were an hour plus, because everybody came with what they wanted to talk about. And they came to talk about things that, should have been handled, within departments or in different areas of the business, not within the leadership team and what we were focused on, as far as driving, our core objectives forward and achieving the outcomes that we were looking for. Once we would do those new business updates, then it's okay. Let's look at the plan execution. And there's, as any of you that are Elate users, there's a great plan execution tab, gives you a very quick one-page view. Here's all your objectives. Here's red, yellow, green. You can see the last time it was updated. You can see who the owner is. You can see how it connects to other core objectives that you have. So it's just a great way to keep everybody grounded and focused on what's not performing as well as we need it to, so that we can put our effort toward improving those things. And then from there, it was action item discussions. What can we do differently? So some of it was brainstorming. Some of it was within an objective of a functional leader. There was an expectation over time that they would come to that meeting with some thoughts and some specific action items that they recommend we undertake to improve the outcome on that objective. that really makes the discussion be that much more productive. But I will say you have to have someone within the organization, and within Form Assembly, it was myself, who has to steward that. So it wasn't unusual for me to use the nudge feature on an objective on a Friday afternoon and nudge one of my colleagues to say, hey, let's make sure we bring this to everyone's attention on Monday, and we talk about some of the things that we would do, because I would have one-on-ones with the leadership team throughout the week. So it's a great way to just connect all that. So I was in sync and aligned with that functional leader, and then it brought us all together as a leadership team, so that everybody was aligned in what we were trying to accomplish overall across the business.
I love that. As you kind of think about, shifting the conversation, being more focused, especially on those objectives that are at risk or behind, having visibility and line of sight into that, how did that, I guess, focus and unified view proactively change, the business, or how the business operated? What did that success look like as you kind of change that cadence?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, well, first, like companies, I think that, are committed to strategic planning, and it being something that is foundational in the way that the business is run is so important, because it not only does it foster accountability, alignment, collaboration cross-functionally, but it puts you in a better position to be successful. And from my experience, I always have seen it shorten timelines to achieve growth. So, for instance, a company like Form Assembly was in business for 15 years before I joined. Um, Took them 15 years to cross the $10 million revenue mark. In less than 3 years after that, we crossed 30 million in ARR. That's pretty amazing growth in a short period of time. A big contributing factor to that was the way that we changed how we plan and what we focus our time on, as part of that process. Because I think, like a lot of companies, you go through your annual planning process and it starts to quickly become like a budgeting exercise. And that's, kind of a recipe for a problem, because now you're just kind of making numbers work. It may be making numbers work for your investors or whoever it is. But planning is about, making those decisions around what we're going to do with the business in this next operating year. And then once that's, been set, now you can say, let's put a financial plan together that's going to support us actually being able to do it. And really having that focus. So I think that's, how I would kind of summarize it, and the way it can really be transformational in your trajectory of growth, or your trajectory of achievement of what you're trying to do with the business.
I love that. Thank you for digging in there.
Yeah.
As we kind of think about, you touched on building a culture of accountability and how Elate has kind of supported you there. I know that you had some clear lines of accountability set. You were very clear with your expectations around how you wanted the team to interact with Elate, how you wanted them to show up to meetings, which I love. Creating that clarity for your team, which then we say a lot of times creates autonomy once you have clarity. So would love to hear a little bit more about these kind of three pillars around accountability that you built.
Yeah. Well, first, I would say, it certainly probably made some folks a little uncomfortable, because maybe the level of accountability wasn't as clear in the past. But, it was not meant to be punitive in any way. It was just meant to be clear of who owns what, and what dependencies there are. So having the ability to look at an objective and understand, okay, where does the accountability for driving this sit? It wasn't, hey, pointing the finger, if that's on you, that's on you. It was, you're driving it. what do you need from us to help support it? So kind of changed the mindset of the way people thought about it. It was less about, somebody else having the accountability for something. It was more about, let's be clear on what we're trying to do. We know someone's driving it. What help is needed, if any, from any other areas? So that cross-functional collaboration just becomes easier. And then that call to action, which we would always take out of that weekly cadence meeting, becomes much more easy to decide on. Because what I found over time, when we first would go through that cadence, typically the CEO would kind of make some decisions on action items. But we actually were able to get to a point where the functional leaders were making those decisions. And that was really key. And then the CEO obviously, could always overrule or chime in or whatever. But we got to a point where there was clear ownership, and we were able to really then focus on being much more efficient as a result of that.
I love it. Thank you. So as we think about, we've built a culture of accountability. We have people, dialed into the rituals. They're providing those status updates. So what I would like to do next is kind of dig into what happened before, the leadership meeting, or what was happening before, and then what happens during the meeting, like how you're kind of leveraging Elate from a reporting standpoint. So first, I know you talked about advanced reporting. All of those status updates are feeding into these reports. That's very dynamic. That's getting sent as a pre-read. So would love to hear just a little bit more context around how this helped serve as a catalyst to then drive the conversation in the meeting.
Yeah, so the advanced reporting functionality, for me as the steward of our process, was really a critical tool that I could use. So it enabled me to be very specific every week on the things that we should be focusing on and highlighting, and not just a bullet list of, hey, these 3 things, but bringing in KPIs and visuals so that everybody is connected to the reasons why we're talking about these things. And the visual aspect of it is so important, I think. It made such a difference because it's just so much easier, to drive a change in behavior when people see it that way. So like, I'll give you an example. We had a, pretty productive sales organization. But they kind of went through this stretch where, we could pretty much forecast with really high accuracy what they were going to do every quarter. And we typically would, when we would look at some reports, we would typically focus on, the current quarter and then within the current year. In one discussion session and one weekly meeting, when I pushed out the advanced report, I decided to bring 2 years worth of history into that report. With Elate, you can easily do that, right? You can toggle on your time periods. And it was so interesting because it showed this kind of 4-quarter view of this same production that they were delivering every quarter for 4 quarters, which was great. But we were trying to determine, okay, how do we keep climbing that ladder and growing? So my point bringing that up is that, sometimes looking at trends, depending on the time frame that you're focused on, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annual, it's going to tell you different things. So having the ability to bring that kind of information ahead of our weekly call was really critical, from my perspective. And then what I typically did was I prepped that. Usually end of the day Friday. It was kind of the last thing I did in most cases on a Friday, unless there was some customer deal happening and we needed to negotiate to get some business. But so I would do that, share it with our CEO, make sure he and I were aligned. And then it would, automate and go out 9 a.m. Monday morning. We had an 11 o'clock meeting. Everybody was aligned, knew what, we were going to focus on. So made a huge difference. Prior to that, there was no advanced preparation, right? Some people looked at the reports ahead of time, most didn't. As I mentioned, most were still trying to update their little section of it, and they weren't even paying attention to the topics and what we were talking about, right? So having the ability to now manage this in a very organized and cohesive way, it's easy to develop that ritual, right? It's easy to then continue to do it that way. So that's how that advanced report feature really added a lot of value for us.
I love that. So let's context switch to, the team gets the advanced report prior to the leadership meeting. Now we step into the leadership meeting. Tell us a little bit about that flow, how that conversation went, how you kind of kept people on pace and on topic and used your time wisely. It sounds like you took the meeting from an hour to down to 45 minutes. Like, let's just talk a little bit about what actually happened in the meeting.
Yeah. So, once we got the new business updates, we would jump right to plan execution. We never talk about what's green unless there's some pressing, reason to. We go right to red first, right? Because that's the most pressing. Whoever was the owner of that objective would then drive the discussion on it. I would still, kind of steward it, make sure we're hitting the things that we need to hit. The other thing that it took time to get there, but we got there, was when people are doing their weekly updates. It's one thing to say whether it's on pace or behind or you've completed it, but it's another thing to put notes and make sure everyone is aware, because Elate is a system that allowed me to kind of understand what's happening on my own without having to ask anybody, if people do a good job documenting things related to objectives that they own. So that was really key. So we would really push making sure that any red and yellow objective, there was adequate content or notes, so that anybody could generally understand where we were. Even if they missed that weekly call, they could easily go back and see what we covered or what we talked about. And then after we finished talking about that, we would actually enter in the action items, right? And that kept us really moving things forward week to week. So that was on the plan execution side. And then the last thing we did before we finished the meeting was just pull up our main scorecard, and I would typically highlight 2 or 3 other KPIs that I felt were meaningful, mostly things that were trending really well. Sometimes it would be, something that maybe is not as well, but it tended to be more of a, hey, we're doing a good job. The teams are doing a good job. Make sure you reinforce that with your teams this week in your team meetings.
Yeah. I think the tendency, or at least when, I'm working with customers, a lot of times they want to talk about every single item, that they're working on, every single objective. And I think what I'm hearing you say is kind of highlighting those, objectives that are at risk behind really focuses the conversation. We are not worried about things that are going well, right? We really want to focus on how can we get things back on track? How can we identify risk earlier and often, with the intel that we have on these objectives. So I love that you are laser focused on, getting an action plan in place on those red, yellow items.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So let's wrap up here with just a couple of best practices. As we kind of transition to the end of the content here with Lou, be thinking of any questions that you might have for him. I want to just kind of recap these kind of core three areas. Lou, if you want to just kind of run through best practices, and then anything we haven't covered as far as learnings or tips and tricks, I think would be really helpful for the crew here.
Sure. Objective status reporting, obviously the system is very easy to communicate to your team with. So, you can set your status reporting cadence, however, you deem it necessary. We really liked the Slack integration. So that was key. That way people could, just put their updates, right there, right in Slack, which was terrific. They didn't even have to leave the platform to be able to do that. So that went, really well. And then in the beginning, I mentioned the nudge feature. I had to use that feature a lot in the beginning, right? Until people get accustomed to, hey, I don't want to get nudged by Lou this week. Let's try to move that forward. So the way that they give you the ability to have multiple ways to do updates is really key. So you really need to leverage that. Second, around clear rituals and expectations. When we implemented the platform, we made sure that everybody understood how we were going to use it, and everyone understood what their role was in that. And we just reinforced that on a regular basis. Like any new system that you implement, it takes a little time as you get moving and get going. But what I found kind of locked our leadership team in even more was the more that they were adopting these best practices and using the system the way it's intended to be used, they were finding it, very helpful in their team discussions. We even leveraged certain information and reports for board meetings at different times if we felt like there was something, that we wanted to share. So it really gives you that ability to get everybody, really committed to using it and using it the way it's intended to be used. Not everybody kind of having their own way of doing it. And then the last thing for me, I became a customer, I guess it was in 2022, I believe. Um, and just, the sales process was excellent, everyone I interacted with, but the implementation process was really key. So really leverage your Elate team, whether it's, someone from the sales process that then hands off to someone like Karlie, who became, my CS and relationship manager. You have to leverage them because while the system is very easy to use and fairly straightforward to implement, leveraging them gets you going faster. I know in the beginning I probably spun my wheels on some things that, oh, I figured I could figure this one out on my own, and I would spend time on it, and then lo and behold, I'd send Karlie a note and she would help me in, 5 minutes, and boom, I was on my way. So really leverage your Elate team. They really bring a lot of efficiency to the way that you're navigating how you're using the platform.
Amazing. Thank you, Lou. Shout out to you for just always being so open to feedback and collaboration too. I think that goes a long way, in a partnership. So really appreciate you sharing your insight and expertise here. We're going to open it up for Q&A and see if anybody has any specific questions, if you want to throw them in the chat. This is kind of fun to be like a radio host or something. If we have any callers. All right. All right, let's see. We have one. Lou, culturally, how have you ensured this is a meeting that is focused on driving action and is impactful for leadership rather than just another meeting on everyone's calendars?
Well, I think really the way that that we were able to do it and continue to do it is just making sure that we're talking about objectives in that meeting. There
Mm,
are a whole host of other topics, other areas in the business that, you're going to drill in on, or have discussions or meetings throughout the week on. But this was specifically for focus on our core company objectives and where are we? Um, are we still aligned on our strategy and our focus for that operating year? And that's really the difference, I think. Making sure that um, when you identify that you're now talking about something that's outside of that, it's very important to quickly call that out and make that an offline discussion outside of this meeting. Um, so that's really how we were able to do that. And again, just be, very focused on those objectives. And one of the things that our CEO actually did, he used to remind our leadership team probably once a month, not every week, but once a month, he would want to go to the landing page that has our mission, our vision, our focus areas, and just to keep everybody grounded on what we're focused on for that year,
mm,
and making sure that everybody understands. Because as you know, during the year, you're going to make adjustments, you're going to pivot, you're going to learn things. And it's okay, right? It's better to make that change sooner rather than later, if it's going to put your business in a better position. So that's where having a meeting like this be very focused on those areas is so important.
love that. All right, we have another one. How do you build accountability? I would think this is going to apply to a lot of people. It's our weakest point and haven't managed to address that. So I would imagine, building that accountability with the objective owners. How do you kind of get that buy-in and get them to kind of care, about making those week over week, those ritual status updates and contributing to the plan?
Yeah, so the way that we did it, I mean, I know different companies have, different kinds of incentive plans, but as a team, um, we had leadership team incentives that were variable, tied to performance of against our plan. 70% of it was tied to the company's objectives. Um, the other 30%, was tied to more individual departmental objectives. Um, when 70% of your variable compensation is tied to a corporate objective, you tend to be a little more focused on it. It's not, you know, to say that that's the only way to do it, but I think if you think about making sure that you're connecting everything, and you start thinking about things like incentives, why would your incentives not be tied to achieving your company goals and objectives, right? So when you do that, you're just improving your chance of success. So that's really how we did it. It was much easier to see someone, say, hey, this is important for the company. I'm also compensated on it. I'm going to make sure I'm focused on it. Because prior to that, everyone had individual objectives. A small portion was tied to the company overall goals and objectives. Um, and then you could see the way people spent their time was based on, well, this is what drives that compensation. So I'm going to spend my time there. So I think what this does is not only brings you that focus on your company strategy, but also then how do we do other things other than the way that we run our meetings to make sure people are really focused on the right things. And connecting compensation to it is a great way to think about it.
Yeah, I would also say, just from working with you, Lou, when people are providing those status updates and commentary, knowing that that information is being discussed and is visible to the rest of the team, I think is really powerful.
Mhm.
Uh, making sure that that's a topic of conversation and people are looking at that and they're going to
Yeah.
take action. on those blockers or on, if someone's raising their hand and needs help. I think that that's really cool to see that almost that full circle of communication that you developed. So updates just aren't going into the ether, they're going into an advanced report, they're being talked at meetings. So I think that's something I just wanted to highlight that you do really well as well.
Thank you.
We do have one more, so we'll just do one more here. Guidance on change management with a leadership team. I know at the onset you said, moving from scattered to consolidated. What advice do you have for kind of rallying the troops and, getting people on board with moving to more of that consolidated view and even system like Elate?
I think the important part there is, when an operational leader, drives a planning process and then focused execution of it, it's not just on that individual, right? It's important that you have CEO support, obviously. And one of the things that we did that worked very well was we had the weekly cadence that I talked about, but when our CEO did his one-on-ones with everyone that functionally reported to him, a big part of that meeting in that agenda was how you doing on your objectives. So it wasn't just, hey, Lou's running this meeting every Monday morning. It's, hey, we're going through this as a team so that we can get to the outcomes that we want as a team. And then as CEO, you're kind of working through stuff with them. It's a great way for them to just reinforce it. So that really made a big difference for me. I felt it became much more effective that the CEO was adding that, additional lens of accountability to it.
Love that. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think that's really all we have time for today. If you have any other questions or if you want to chat with myself or Lou, I know that we are both more than willing to hop on, one-on-one conversations and kind of talk through anything that might be on your mind related to Elate or even just strategic planning. So I know that we have let's see, one second here. I know that we're going to be sending a PDF focused on rituals and operating rhythm. We're going to send that out along with, I believe, the recording after today's session. But we just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Lou. Thank you for all of you for making time today and your busy schedules, carving out time to learn and hear from one of our best customers, Lou. So thank you all for being here. And Lou, thanks again for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks, Karlie. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Good luck finishing your plans.
Thanks, Lou. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.